Nowadays, it seems like every other movie hitting the big screen is either a sequel, remake, or an adaptation of a book. And while it's arguable that this could be toned down, it's also true that this has resulted in some pretty great movies, as well as some bad ones. One thing that is necessary in adapting a book is changes. Just because it worked on page doesn't mean it will on film, so filmmakers often have to change it up and make it work. For example, would Kilgrave be as menacing in Jessica Jones if he'd had purple skin like he does in the comics? However, sometimes filmmakers need to know when to stop with the changes. Take Deadpool as an example. In X-Men Origins of Wolverine, he's completely unrecognizable, which resulted in his character and that movie being absolutely terrible. However, in his 2016 film, they kept him very similar to the comics, which resulted in a pitch-perfect representation of the character. So, for my first video essay here on Area 616, I'd like to ask the question, when do changes to the source material go too far? Let's dig in and find the answer. To answer this question, I'm going to use an adaptation that has suffered a lot of changes as an example, the Hobbit trilogy. These and the fantastic early 2000s Lord of the Rings movies are all based on the classic books by J.R.R. Tolkien. Now, I haven't read the Lord of the Rings books because they're 300-400 page monsters and ain't nobody got time for that. But from what I've heard, I'm faithful to them, only changing what's absolutely necessary. But I have, however, read The Hobbit and seen all 3 films, and that's definitely not the case here. The Hobbit was originally supposed to be only 2 movies directed by Guillermo del Toro, but the studio wanted a quote-unquote epic trilogy like the original, and ended up bloating it to 3 movies, and getting Peter Jackson, the director of the original 3, to come back for them. The results are interesting. Now, I personally don't despise the first 2, or An Unexpected Journey in the Desolation of Smaug, but they are definitely nowhere as good as the Lord of the Rings films. But they weren't necessarily terrible, in my opinion, just a bit bloated. However, the Battle of the Five Armies was truly quite horrendous. I had a hard time watching it, and not just because of all the shiny CGI fight scenes. The problem is that the longer the trilogy goes on, the more it forgets who its main character is, and more importantly for this video, what its main story is. The Lord of the Rings was an epic adventure story, and the movies did that perfectly. But The Hobbit really isn't like The Lord of the Rings. It is an adventure story, but not quite of epic proportions. We are following Bilbo Baggins as he goes on an adventure, which does end with the Battle of the Five Armies, like the movie, but that's only the last, 30 pages of the book? In that, Bilbo is actually knocked out halfway through, and we actually stay with him, waking up after the battle was over. I'm not saying that's what the movie should have done, but I think it should have focused more on Bilbo during the battle, not jumping between Gandalf, Thorin, Bard, Tauriel, Kili, and Legolas. There's way too many characters, especially for a movie that's supposed to be focusing on one hobbit. In short, the movie ignores its roots and tries to bloat the story and characters into something they weren't meant to be. And that, my friends, is when the change goes too far. When it misunderstands and mistreats the source material. The Hobbit isn't a sprawling epic like The Lord of the Rings. It's much, much more subdued. The Lord of the Rings books follow Frodo, Gandalf, Aragorn, and all the others. They were sprawling epics, and that, among other reasons, is why they work so well. But if you take something and twist it into something it isn't supposed to be, purely to try and get some extra box office money, that's when things will start to go bad. And that's my point. When adapting something, whether it be a book or a comic or even a video game, you must always understand just what the source material is at its core. Not just on the surface, but underneath. What is the story trying to say? What does it really mean? Who are these characters? Warner Brothers didn't understand The Hobbit when they were making these movies, and because of that, they made changes that betrayed the original story and characters. It'd be like if someone took the Magic Treehouse books and changed them into an intense horror mystery series, It just ain't gonna work out. Okay. I've lost all faith in humanity.
Fool of a Took! Throw yourself in next time and rid us of your stupidity.